So something to write on and something to write with. Put everything else away. And then you will be using your partners, so if you'll just go ahead and keep those same partnerships that you had previously. So if you'll just remember that you're staying in the student stance, if teacher questions come up, jot those down on a sticky note. And I'm going to stay in the teacher stance so that I can teach through the entire lesson, and then we will debrief afterwards. So the name of the book that I'm going to share with you today is written by Betsy Byers, and it's called The Moon and I. Betsy Byers is a professional children's author, and in this book, she writes about interesting events that she has experienced through her life. So I'm going to read one of them that is called A Snake Named Moon. And as I read that short story, I want you to think about what is the single event that Betsy Byers is writing about. A snake named Moon. I glanced up and saw it. Snake, I said to myself. That looks like a snake. I got up out of my porch rocking chair and went closer. That is a snake. I stopped moving closer. The snake lay on an overhead beam. And an overhead beam is a long piece of wood that holds up the ceiling of a building. The snake lay on an overhead beam. It was long and slender. It was doubled back over its body, its head pillowed on one of its loops. The snake was so dark in color, it looked black. The eyes were round, the stare unblinking, and the round, unblinking eyes were looking at me. I had been sitting on the porch for an hour editing one of my books, and for an hour this snake had been watching me. Now, I don't like anybody watching me when I'm writing, particularly snakes. I can't even write when my dog's watching. My dog can lie down under the word processor and sleep. That's fine. But once he starts watching, I can't write. I have to say, want to go for a walk? Walk and supper are my dog's favorite words. I can't keep saying want supper or the dog would end up weighing 1,000 pounds. Here's the way I write a book. I start on the word processor and write as much as I can and then print it. I take what I've printed, go sit somewhere else like the porch, read it, say, this is terrible, and start working on it again. I go back to the word processor, put in the changes, and print it. I take what I've printed, go sit somewhere else, say, oh, this is still terrible, and rewrite it. I keep doing this until I say, this is not as terrible as it used to be. Then this is getting better. And finally, hopefully, this is not bad at all. That's how I do my writing, no matter what kind it is, short stories, essays, novels, and it's worked for 30 years. So I was on the porch saying, this is still terrible, when I looked up and saw this snake coiled high on one of the beams. I moved my rocking chair back a bit. If the snake dropped off the beam, it could land in my lap. Nobody wants a lap full of snake. I settled down to watch. Can you think for a minute? What has happened so far? Just think for a minute. Ida, I need to tell your partner what's happened so far. I settled down to watch. The snake continued to lie in its relaxed coil. It shifted position occasionally, stretching out full length, recoiling, curving, but it never moved from the beam. I didn't know much about snakes, but the color, black, was comforting. Black snakes are harmless and beneficial. They go after mice, which I had a few of, and which they were welcome to. This snake was obviously not on the prowl at the moment. It might even be digesting one of my mice. Slowly the snake raised its head, and I saw the startling milky white of the chin and throat. I decided to call my husband for a second opinion. Yes, it's a black snake, Ed confirmed. But the throat is white. Are you sure black snakes have white throats? Yes. Black snakes don't, bite, do they? They can. Oh. But their bite is never more than a scratch. Oh. I was gaining confidence. If cornered, the black snake will put up a good front, he went on. It will even shake its tail like a rattler, but it's not a good fighter. Sometimes it becomes so frantic it bites its own body. Now that was my kind of snake. There was a pause while my husband and I admired the snake, and the snake allowed us to. Have you got a heavy plastic garbage bag? My husband asked abruptly. Garbage bag? What do you want a garbage bag for? I think I'll take the snake to the airport, Ed said. His hangar at the airport was troubled by mice. My reaction was instant and protective. You can't have it, I said. It's mine. Meeting a snake on my front porch had been a pleasant distraction, and I like distractions, especially when I'm writing. After a while, however, I went back inside to the word processor. The window in the room where I work faces out into the porch, and I got up frequently to check on what was now my snake. The snake was always there, but its position changed every time I looked. Sometimes the snake was draped around the beam like a scarf. Sometimes the snake's tail dangled below. Sometimes the head was tucked out of sight under the body. Whatever the position, it was graceful and pleasing to watch. As the afternoon wore on, my snake checks became more frequent. I didn't think the snake would spend the night on the porch, and I wanted to see where it went after it left. I wanted to see it slither down the wisteria vine, which was probably how it got on the porch in the first place, and I wanted to see where it would go. Then something happened to me. I became totally engrossed in what I was writing. And the word engrossed means that you're really concentrating on something. I became totally engrossed in what I was writing. Now, most of the time, I plod along, writing word by word, sentence by sentence. But then sometimes, suddenly, it's like switching to a higher gear in a car. I take off. That's what happened now. I took off. I wrote furiously for about an hour. It was as if an invisible dam had burst, and my fingers on the keyboard could barely keep up with my mind. It was 6 o'clock when the magical flow stopped. My thoughts immediately returned to the snake, and I jumped up and went to the window. The snake was gone. Of all the stupid things to do, I had let my writing get in the way of my snake watching. So today you're going to have an opportunity to think about and to write about some interesting events from your own life. What was that single event that Betsy Byers wrote about in the excerpt that I just shared with you? What was the single event? It's not a trick question. Say a little more about the snake. Can anybody add on to what Becky said? Okay. Can anybody add on? Okay, great, thank you. So, as you said, the single interesting event that she wrote about in the story A Snake Named Moon was the time that she encountered a snake on her porch. So I'm going to help you think through some things that might help to trigger you of some interesting events that have happened to you in your life. And as I ask you these questions, I'm not going to have you talk about them or write them down. I just want you to use these questions as a way to kind of get you thinking. So what are some interesting events from your own life that you could write about? What is something funny or scary that has happened to you? What is something interesting that has happened to you at school, maybe as a child or as a teacher or in college? What is something interesting that's happened to you at home, maybe growing up or recently? So if you would take out that piece of paper that I asked you to get earlier, and we're going to do something called a quick write. And when we do a quick write, two things happen. First of all, it's very, very, very good job. And secondly, you have to write the whole entire time. So it's going to go by pretty quickly. So I want you to think about some interesting events that have happened to you in your life. And all I want you to do for the quick write is I just want you to make a list of those interesting events that have happened to you in your life. Don't worry about spelling, punctuation. You're just making a list. You don't have to explain anything. Just jot down those interesting events that you can think of. Are you ready? Get set. Go. Finish your last word. And stop. Ida, I need a knee. Share with your partners some of the ideas that you wrote down on your list. Could I get somebody to share with us, whole group, one of your interesting events that has happened to you in your life?
I fell off the swing in fourth grade.
Okay, thank you for sharing. Somebody else, an interesting event.
I split my pants, my jeans, in third grade gym class.
Okay. I'm still traumatized. Thank you. Anybody else? Did anybody hear their partner share something interesting? What did your partner share? And use your partner's name.
Kim had somebody's hat fell on her wedding dress when she was walking down the aisle, and it followed her all the way to the. And so did Katie. Trying to pick it up.
Okay.
A hat fell on the train of her wedding dress as she was walking down the aisle, so the hat and the person followed her.
Great. Thank you for sharing, and thanks for listening to your partner so well. Thank you. So as you were listening to your partner, or even listening whole group, did you think of anything else that might be an interesting event in your life? if you did, can you jot that down really quickly? I'll give you just a couple seconds to jot any other ideas that you have. All right, for writing time today, will you please look through that list that you wrote during the quick write? Will you pick one of those interesting events that you think you can write more about, and will you circle it? Pick one of those interesting events that you can write more about and circle. So during writing time today, you are going to tell us more about what happened during that event in writing. So tell us more about the interesting thing that happened to you. If you, during writing time, a couple things. First of all, we want to be respectful for other writers and know that some writers really need it to be very quiet. So if you would keep your writing to yourself, I will give you a chance to share at the end, but if you would not talk during the writing time, so no talking, no walking, no walking, no talking. If you would also remember to try and skip lines as you write, in case this is a piece that you decide to go back and revise, you'll have that space to be able to do that. Also, I want you to not worry about any spelling or anything like that. Just get your ideas down on the paper for right now. If you happen to finish writing about that one event, go back to your list and choose another one and write about that. During the first couple minutes of the writing time, I'm going to sit and write with you. So especially during that time, there's no walking, no talking. I won't talk to anybody. But after I finish writing with you for a couple minutes, then I'll be around in case you have a question or need me. What questions do you have about writing time today? Yes?
How long should it be?
What other questions might you have about writing time today? Okay, writers, let's get started. I'm going to give you about 1 more minute. It's okay if you're not done, but if you want to start finishing up that last line. And if you'll finish up that last word you're working on and go ahead and put your pen or pencil down. So for share time today, we are going to give you an opportunity to share. If you would look back at what you just wrote, and will you please select one word or one line that you are willing to read out loud. One word or one line. And will you put your finger or put your pen on that so you remember where that spot is? One word or one line. So we are just going to go very, very, very quickly around the room and have you share that one word or that one line. But you have 2 jobs while we do this today. The first job is, if you are reading, could you make sure that you speak in a nice, loud, clear voice so that everybody on the opposite side of the room can hear what you're saying? And then if you are a listener, can you really make sure to listen what people are sharing? Because we're going to talk about those ideas, and if you were just only concentrating on your idea, then you will not be able to participate in that conversation. So 2 jobs. Do you have your spot? All right, we are going to start right. And if you, since you're holding that spot with your pen or pencil or your finger, if you would make sure that you're looking at the speaker as we go around, we're going to start right here with Amelia.
Multiplication.
I just turned 7, so this baby is.
I remember telling myself to breathe.
Spring had finally arrived in a little town where winter blanket. I'm sorry to tell you, but you have breast cancer. Love. Ireland. Moonshine was a farm cat, and he or she, I don't remember, knew it. Borders.
I hate starting writings. I never know where to start.
So we said yes and told him to get ready. 4th of July. The guest list included many of the Twin Cities local celebrities, TVs, models, photographers, and so forth. Scary noise.
Terrified.
Secret place.
The leaves on the trees were just coming out and were the brilliant emerald green that only early spring leaves have.
Leaves ready.
Not leave.
Okay. How about this table?
Sketching. We wanted the day to go as smoothly as it could. A big flash of light bulb.
Stay bound.
We went to a mechanic and he told us, you'll be lucky if the tires are still on that camper by morning.
Right here.
Florida.
How about right here?
Beaches. I fell several times, but I didn't give up.
Have you ever been called Elephant Woman?
My heart was pounding and my palms were sweating from the nerves and anticipation.
Snorkeling.
Rattlesnakes.
You had a friend that owned a World War II trainer plane. I was stuck in the middle of the lake with no way to get back to shore.
Paris. Once the bull was sighted, all students quickly made it in the building and a lockdown was called by our principal. We knew we were in trouble.
There was this one rooster that would come out and chase us.
And I mean really grounded.
1 minute I was swinging and the next I was sailing to the ground face first. On edge. Frantic. It was a hot, sunny day. We rode in my hand-me-down car, echoing the radio's Christmas tunes with the excitement of birth flooding my blood through my body. I'm proud of this day when I was only 4.5 years old.
I reviewed my special nieces so many times that it looked worn out.
I remember the day like it was yesterday.
The awkward family photo.
All right, did everybody get a chance? So what did you hear somebody else read today that kind of got you interested? What did you hear? Okay, and that was over here, right? Oh, right here, okay. What else did you hear that got you interested? Okay, and that was in the back there. Anything else that got you interested?
The camper.
Right here, right with the tire. So what question do you have for a writer about what they shared today? What question do you have? What to who? Who wants to ask that question? You'll ask it directly to that writer. So who wants to pose a question? Go ahead.
We went out east. We took our pop-up camper and did the whole East Coast in like 7 days. And our car broke down in Philadelphia, and that's an area you don't want to be in after dark. And the mechanic told us, your camper will be stripped if you leave it out here. So they ended up working on it through the night, and we went to Denny's at like 3 in the morning after, and it was pouring rain, and it was the worst night ever.
Okay. What other questions do you have for somebody about what they wrote? Mm-hmm.
I was 16 and I was hired for $50 that night to work for a photographer who was having his annual party, and it was, with all these celebrities there. And one person brought his pet tiger, was walking around, and so I kind of followed him around right before morning to look for that tiger.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, so that would end the lesson. The kids would know that tomorrow they're going to go back and look at some more personal narratives and have some more opportunities to write, okay? So you can step out of that really well-behaved, thank you for your hard work, student role, and let's go back into the teacher role, and let's think through the lesson that you just experienced. Let's try. So let me talk first, and I will take a chance to answer questions and stuff, but let's think through just a couple things first. How did that lesson's structure support you as a writer? What were some of the things that were intentionally done to support you as a writer?
Come up with multiple ideas to write about.
So let's think a little more about that. Where were all the opportunities to get those ideas? Where did they come from?
Well, from the story.
So go ahead.
Also from when each student shared an idea before we even started writing it.
Great. So you have the story as a source of inspiration to kind of get you going. If that didn't hook you, you had an opportunity to talk with your partner. If that didn't hook you, you had an opportunity to hear others share. And a lot of you did go back and add to that list after you had those opportunities. So maybe, I know sometimes I think, gosh, my ideas just aren't that great. Like I don't have that many great events. But it didn't have to be this great, super like exciting trip to Hawaii or something. It could have been something very simple. But lots of opportunities will be built into the lesson to help your kids get ideas. Now, let's say that today just isn't working for them. Tomorrow, there's going to be another personal narrative. There'll be some other things that we'll think about, and so they may be able to generate some ideas then. What else did you notice about how the lesson structure supported you as a writer?
Time to write.
So say a little more about time to write.
We went to school, but we were actually given the time and the quiet to get started.
Okay. Are any others thinking about that time to write and how it affected you as a writer?
They gave us permission not to finish.
How does that support you?
Well, there isn't that pressure that it has to be done and has to be done right. It has to be ready to turn in. at the end.
Yeah. What are others thinking about that time to write?
You also didn't give us a time frame, so kids weren't watching the clock going, oh, I got 5 more minutes left. Or, oh, I got 5 more minutes left. We didn't know when we were going to be done.
Sure. So that daily time is built in every single day. And I think you're right. Things like it doesn't have to be finished because maybe I am writing because I know I have to. But maybe this idea just isn't sticking with me. Like I'm just not feeling it. I know tomorrow I can go and start something else. I will tell you on the flip side, if you have kids that are used to starting something and finishing it, it's going to be a bit of a shift for them. But once they get in the habit, they understand it. Later as they go on, and maybe even tomorrow, they are told if you want to go back to what you were working on yesterday, you're more than welcome to. But at least they don't have that pressure of it has to be done right now. I just try and give them a heads up. You just have a couple more minutes just so you can finish your thought, because we know we're not going to finish it. So let's go ahead and bring up your question, though, because I think it kind of fits into this timepiece. Go ahead. Yeah, definitely. And honestly, that's how I would respond to it. I would probably not have gotten as polite of a response as I got from you guys. And they would probably keep asking me again. And honestly, I'm not going to answer it. I don't know how long your piece has to be. I don't know. I don't know what you're writing about. And I don't know anywhere it says a personal narrative has to be X amount of words or X amount of pages. And in this case, we're not going to put that parameter on the kids. So your writing is done when you've told me everything you can tell me about your story. But also, I gave you an option to go back to that quick write. If you happen to finish, go back and use that. I don't necessarily tell kids up front the amount of time that I don't know. I'm not saying you can't. Personally, I don't. But one thing that I do, and even in 5th grade, is I think about that time. We want our kids to be able to write the entire time. And one of the things that we have to work towards is getting them to be able to sustain that writing. So if you were, let's say that tomorrow's the first day of school, you're not going to be able to have your kids sit and sustain their writing for 20 minutes. You might have some, but chances are you're going to have a group of kids that aren't going to be able to handle that. And so we want to start on really, really small increments and build upon that time. So one thing that I think about doing is at the beginning of the year, I'll just ask them, how long do you think you can write as a 5th grader? It's the first day of school. Oh, we can write for 3 hours. Okay. Well, I don't have 3 hours, so let's think realistically about this. And so usually we end up maybe 20 minutes. They'll say, oh, we can write for 20 minutes. And so I'll say, okay, so I'm going to allot 20 minutes for you today for writing time. And then I set the timer for 1 minute. I don't tell them, but I set the timer for 1 minute. What happens at the end of that 1 minute? I'm not done. And so my initial response is, you need more time? Yeah, okay, tomorrow let's go for 11 minutes. And then I just keep moving. Yes, I know there are 5 kids that are looking at the clock thinking, God, I hope she doesn't teach math because she has no concept of time. However, I know that there are 35 kids in my classroom who every single one of them had success because I only gave them a very small increment of time. Tomorrow, I'm going to build on that time. But if I go out the door first day, 20 minutes, and already kids have failure, oftentimes that's where we can't get them to sustain it because they don't feel like they can. So really start, even though your manual is going to tell you, have them write for 5 or 10 minutes, start in really small increments. One of the things that you'll find is that in the beginning of the units, your lessons are longer because we haven't necessarily taught them those skills that they need for that writing time or for the genre. But as you continue on, your lessons are going to get shorter so you can allot for more writing time in your lessons. What else did you notice about the lesson that kind of supported you as a writer? Anything else?
You broke it down into steps.
Mm-hmm. So say a little more about those steps.
Well, you read, and then you had us brainstorm a little, and then share, and so it was really broken down instead of saying just start writing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sure. Yes.
When you finished reading the story, then you asked us questions to give us ideas of things to write about.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Definitely. What else?
I like the parameters you gave. Skip lines and don't worry about your spelling and don't worry about your grammar. It frees you up a little bit.
And not that those things aren't important, but remember, we're at the brainstorming and drafting stage right now. And so right now, they aren't important because I may not even come back to this. The skipping of the lines, one thing, it's a hard habit for the kids to get into. And so I just will put dots on their paper every other line. As I'm walking around, I'll just say, oh, that might help you remember to only write on the lines that have a dot. And even if they still don't make them redo it. Once they get to revision and they got Post-it notes everywhere because they didn't allow for that space, they kind of learn by mistake, and they'll figure it out for the next time. So it's not a big deal. What did you notice about the facilitation of the lesson? How I facilitated it? So go ahead and open up to that personal narrative unit. And if you'll look at a day's lesson where you're using a piece of text, and you should see a shaded box. It's a gray shaded box, and it says suggested vocabulary. If you have a page, can you call it out in case others need it?
125.
For what grade? Fifth grade, 125. What about third grade? 131, 127. What about fourth grade? 128. What about sixth grade? Y'all got it? Okay. So this is not a vocabulary program. However, they do recognize the fact that there are certain words that we need to define so that students understand the text that we're reading. So you will, when you are reading literature out loud to the kids or even an excerpt from text, they may give you this suggested vocabulary. The procedure that they use is just like making meaning. So you read the entire word, including the entire sentence, that has the word in it. Then you quickly define it, like I defined overhead beam and engrossed. And then you read it again so that now they can hear that word in context. So it's not taught ahead of time because it's not a vocabulary program. I just want them to have the tools so they can understand the text that I'm reading. Now you have suggestive vocabulary, and then sometimes you'll have ELL vocabulary. Really, that's a teacher decision as far as which of those words you're going to use with your students. In my case, I would have done both, but I think I would have added wisteria vine, which is not in either of those because kids in Las Vegas don't know. I don't know what that is. I can figure it out, but I don't know what that is. And so that may have been a good one for me to add. But any other words that you want to add, that's fine. But you don't have to use all those words. It's making that teacher decision. Yes, this is a scripted kind of program, but that's a teacher decision you have to make based upon the needs of your students. But just try and keep it in that process of reading the entire sentence, defining it, and then reading it again so they hear it in context. I just take sticky notes and put it by the word and write the definition because I'm not good at thinking of things on the spot, so it just supports me. What else did you notice that I did as I facilitated the lesson? Thank you for the vocabulary, pulling that out. What else did you notice?
You also participated the first couple of minutes by saying you were writing.
So in the writing, yeah. So when you get to the independent writing time every single day, it will tell you to sit and write with the kids. I think it says like 5 to 10 minutes, I want to say. Don't do 5 to 10 minutes because a lot of times in the beginning we don't even have our kids writing that long. But even if you had 20 minutes to devote to writing, 5 to 10 minutes, that's a long time for you to write. What is important is that every day you do write with your kids, but I just sat here for a couple minutes, just a couple minutes. And what it does is, first of all, when kids go to take these high-stakes tests, they have to be self-starters. I cannot be in that room saying, oh, you can do it, Jeff, keep going. I can't say anything. If Jeff decides to sit there and do nothing, really my hands are tied legally as far as how I can get them going. I can't say, Jeff, why don't you write about this? I can't do any of that. So we have to get our kids to become self-starters. We also have to get our kids to realize that they have their own ideas and that their ideas do not have to come from me. So this is a habit, and sometimes it is a habit that is really hard to break for them because they are used to, you know how you give instructions and you have those two kids every single day. So what am I supposed to do? And as soon as you answer them, they know that tomorrow I can come right back up there and she's going to tell me. So it's really forcing us to write so that they have, it's just the first couple minutes I'm asking you to be self-starters. It's not the entire writing time. It's just for a couple minutes. Then I can go and support you if you need that support afterwards. The other thing is that the research tells us that in order to be good teachers of writing, we have to write. And I don't know about you, but I can barely find time to plan my lessons, much less sit down and write for 20 minutes every night. So this does give me an opportunity to quickly write, just very quickly write something so that even I can come back and use it at another time if I wanted to use that as a model to show my kids, because they will have you model writing. They give you examples to use that are in your manuals, but how nice it is to use your own because then you know the background to it. Finally, with that being said, I do try and sit, and not that you ladies were not writing, but I usually sit at the table where there's kids not writing. And I don't talk to them. The other thing I don't do that I'm really bad about is I don't give them any dirty looks. Because that used to be my thing, is I'm not going to tell you, you can't interrupt me, but I'm going to give you a dirty look so you know. But that's just as much as of a response. So I will try and sit at the table where I have a couple kids that may not be writing, and sometimes I sit at a couple places, because when you're completely ignoring them and just really writing, eventually maybe a couple weeks down the line, they'll pick up on it and they'll know that they're going to get support in a little bit. They just need to get started on their own. The other thing that I really like that they have implemented into this is that I knew I was supposed to write with the kids, but I would sit down and think, all right, let me make a grocery list, or let me make a to-do list, which is great for me, but it serves no purpose to my kids for writing instruction. So what they've done is, can you look in the beginning of your personal narrative unit? You're going to see a section, I think it's by the overview page, that says teacher as writer. It's on the page that says the week overview. It'll be on the right-hand side in the margin. It says teacher as writer. So what this does is it gives you some ideas of some things that you can write about that are going to mimic what we're asking our kids to write about. So these have been so helpful for me, because I don't know what to write about. I was in, I don't know, I was somewhere and I was training and I was trying this out. And so it said to write about the place that you were at, which I was at a school, and it said to use the 5 senses and to include those in your description. I had no idea how difficult that was. At least it was difficult for me. I couldn't figure out what the place smelled like. I couldn't figure out what the place, and some of them may not apply, but I had no idea that that could be that difficult. Yet how many times have I told kids, gosh, you didn't include all the 5 senses? And so it kind of gave me an understanding to what it might be like as they go about doing these things. Poetry, I had no idea was that difficult for me to write. I really struggle writing poetry, but that's good that I'm having that experience so that I can share that with the kids, how, ways that I went about it. So I think that teacher as a writer section is really helpful, and then making sure that you do a lot, just a couple minutes every day during that independent writing time. Just write with them for a couple minutes, get your notebook going, and then you would spend the rest of the time conferring with the kids. What else did you notice about the way that I facilitated the lesson? What did you notice about the way I responded to you when you shared?
You didn't spend a lot of time discussing each person's. Had them read and move on.
Yeah. So one of the things that we unintentionally do is that when I went to college, everything was positive reinforcement. And you tell them how wonderful they are, and not that that's a bad thing. But if I had said to you, oh my gosh, Kelly, that's the best idea I've ever heard, unintentionally, I've shut down 3 other kids who are like, oh, Kelly got the answer, I'm done. I'm zoning out. So what they encourage you to do is called neutral responses. And so I tried to do that today. Thank you for sharing. Who can add on to what Mary said? Who else was thinking about that? What questions do you have for somebody? So these neutral responses where I'm acknowledging, I did hear you. I listened to your writing. Maybe even nodding or smiling could be an acknowledgement. But I'm not going to overpraise one over the other one. Does that make sense? And so for me, it was a habit that I had to break, and it took a really long time to break that habit. But the other thing that happens is that with the shift that Common Core is asking us to make in our classrooms, we are no longer supposed to be the bearers of all information, nor the ones who validate everything. And so how much more powerful is it that I'm not the one saying that you have a great idea, but one of your peers is saying, I want to know more about that. That does a lot for a kid, more so than when we do that for them. And so it helps us to make that shift in our classroom. So it's called neutral response. It's one of the facilitation tips that they encourage you to use as you teach your lessons. It's really hard, really, really hard. And it's kind of, like I say, a habit. The kids kind of will look at you in the beginning like, especially for me, it was we called them gate kids, the gifted and talented. They would look at me like, hello, I gave you the right answer. Can you tell me? So a lot of them kind of really struggled with it at the beginning. But as they got used to it, it really did kind of get them to do more listening to each other and not just listening to me. So anything else that you noticed about the facilitation? think that was probably the open-ended questions for the most part. I try and stay away from the closed-ended questions. In your manuals, they're always open-ended questions that you're asking the kids so that we don't get yes-no responses. We have some more room that we can kind of go a little bit deeper. So how could lessons like this help your students grow as writers?
It makes them feel successful, and feel ready to try that again.
What else?
It's non-judgmental, at the beginning. Let them want to
Great.
Valuing your own experiences.
They know it didn't have to be perfect right away with spelling and grammar and everything.
And lots of opportunities to learn from each other. Like I don't have all the background knowledge in the world, and nor do my kids individually, but collectively, there's a whole bunch of knowledge there, and even like background experience that they can share with each other. So what questions do you have for me about the lesson that I demonstrated for you?
You'll probably touch on this later, but as you get deeper into it, how long should those reading lessons be? Where you're reading the excerpt from the story, or you read the whole story? I know you said you touch on that later.
Yeah, but I will tell you, for the mini lesson, so you saw 3 parts to that lesson, which are always included in every lesson that you teach. You saw the getting ready to write at the beginning, which was where I read the text, we did the quick write, and oftentimes there's partner work, and you did talk to your partners. Then we had the second part of the lesson was the independent writing time, and that was independent. So even though I have a partner, I don't have to sit next to them. I'm not writing with them. It's independent. And then you saw the share and reflection time at the end. So I will go ahead and just answer it, and then there will be a slide, too. We can look at it. So you're looking at that mini lesson. Really should not be any longer than 15 or 20 minutes. That's it. I will say that they have thought through the length of some of the text as they wrote the second edition, because that was some of the feedback that we gave them from the first edition. This book is way too long. It takes me 2 days to get through the lesson. So they did think through that to kind of help you out and maybe expand those lessons across 2 days. But if you think about the facilitation techniques and not responding to what everybody said, that's going to help with time. I only took a couple responses every single time. That helps with timing of it. And I really stuck to the lesson. I didn't add anything else to it. And as teachers, oftentimes we do add because we want to take advantage of those teachable moments. And so sometimes that's where our lessons get a little bit lengthier. But for the most part, you want to keep that to 15 to 20 minutes. And then you're going to have your time to write will be the middle time. And then the ending part is going to be anywhere 3 to 5 minutes on the share. And really 5 minutes is kind of on the long end. Sometimes they're sharing their writing. Sometimes it's with a partner. Sometimes it's whole group. Sometimes we're reflecting back on how we did with our partner work or how our behaviors were. Sometimes it's a combination. So that last part is only going to be, I would say, about 3-4 minutes is all you need to allocate. So that middle time, I hate to say it this way, but that's the middle time would be that writing time. But I just know that as I travel, some districts like in Las Vegas, we have 49 minutes of writing instruction every single day, but we're given that time. I was just somewhere recently, they have 20 minutes a day. And I don't know the answer to that, but it's designed to be about 45 minutes long. You can get it done in about 40 minutes, I would say. Do know that in the beginning of your lesson or the beginning of your units, if your lesson is a little bit lengthier, that's okay because they haven't built up the skills to understand that genre yet, so they won't have as much to write about. And then know that as you get through the unit, your lessons are going to get shorter, and you can definitely give them more time for the writing. And we can come back and talk more about the time again and maybe brainstorm some ideas if you are in a crunch, how you can go about getting these lessons in. The only thing I would suggest, though, is if you have to break up a lesson, you want to make sure that kids have time to write every single day. So if I had to break up that lesson that I just did because of time and I don't have that much time, I would have maybe only read part of that text and maybe just did part of the beginning part, but I still want to make sure they have time to write every day, and I want to have the reflection and the share time at the end. So rather than saying, okay, today I'm just going to read the text, tomorrow they're just going to write, kind of break it up so that they're getting all 3 components every day. Does that make sense? Okay. Any other questions that you have about the lesson that you experienced?
You've already touched on this a little bit, but my biggest problem I find with lessons like this is you've got those few kids that have almost no experiential background in anything.
Yeah.
And when you give them such an open-ended question, like write about something that's happened to you, they just need to think of us. I mean, even for me, I got to be honest, it's kind of hard to make that list.
Yeah.
But then you think about kids who have never been anywhere or done anything, and they really have a hard time getting started. Do you have any suggestions and
Yeah.
ways to not be feeding them the answer, but to also get them going?
I think your first way is in validating whatever it is that they come up with. And as you'll have a couple kids who won't be able to think of anything, you'll have somebody who'll think of something that'll be very simple. I got in trouble because my room was a mess last night, or something just very simple that didn't seem like what our perception was of an interesting event, but it's an event. I worked with a school in Las Vegas that is in a very, very impoverished area, and I mean, you drive up to the school and there's just literally shacks around it. And I had the same question asked to me by a gentleman on the staff, and for a second I thought, oh my gosh, I remembered what I saw as I pulled up, and I knew these kids weren't going to this place and this place. But then I thought about it, they're probably experiencing things that I can't even imagine, nor do I want to, like maybe taking care of all of their siblings the night before and having to cook dinner for them. That would be an interesting event. Maybe their parents aren't home at night and they're in charge. Or maybe there's not a television and they have to entertain themselves some other way. And, so I think validating that all of those things are interesting events. And finding that one kid, again, that, did write about something that wasn't Hawaii or wasn't, something that we would perceive as being interesting. And then make sure that they share so that others are like, oh, yeah, I can write about the time we played soccer in the middle of the street or whatever. The other thing to keep in mind is that if they can't really come up with something today, they got lots of opportunities as the weeks go on to think of some other things. So sometimes too, that validation will come through that partner talk. They'll hear their partners and, oh yeah, I could write about this. So I think there's lots of ways that are built into it, but really just validating it, not expecting it to be, necessarily one thing. What other questions might you have about the lesson? So what I want to do is I want to walk you through, and I probably won't do it as a lesson, more so as just walking you through what it might look like for revision. So you saw a lesson that was in the first part of the unit where we're just brainstorming and drafting. So remember that on day 1 of week 3, they're going to pick one of those pieces that they wrote, and they're going to commit to it, and now they're going to take it through the rest of the writing process. So I'm going to walk you through a revision lesson. I don't know about you, but when I think about the writing process, the one part of that process that I absolutely hate the most with 35 kids in a classroom is that revision piece. Because how do you do that with 35 kids? They're at completely different ends of the spectrum. And it was always at that point where I just got really frustrated and just wanted to quit. And then they get frustrated as well. They don't want to revise. I'm sure you've had conferences where you make suggestions and they're like, yeah, no, I'm not going to do that, Or let me just start again since there's so much wrong with this idea. And so how do we go about that in our classrooms? So what they've done with revision to me is just absolutely brilliant. And when I first thought, I was like, I don't know if this is going to work, but it did kind of excite me. And it's just brilliant in the way that they go about it. And so I want to take you through that so you can kind of see what that looks like. And I saw a hand.
Well, I was just going to ask, what is the expectation that you give them, for a finished product?
Good question. We're going to come to that. I promise.
Okay.
Yes, I promise. So let's pretend that today's a revision lesson. We're going to pretend that this is the piece that the piece that you just wrote is the one that you're committing to, since it's all you have right now. So if you pull that piece out, and can you just stay with me for about 20 more minutes? I'll give you a break. Is that fair? I know it's kind of warm, and so it probably helps to get up and move. All right, so pull out that piece that you just wrote this morning that you're committing to, and can you just quickly reread it and then look at me when you're finished? All right, so you are going to need some sticky notes for this part. And so if you'll take a couple sticky notes, you actually may want to tear them apart because you want some smaller, does that make sense? Like maybe tear into 2 or 3. All right, so on one of those smaller sticky notes, I'm going to help you think through your draft and think about ways that you can improve it so that the reader can better understand the interesting event that you've written about. So on one of those small sticky notes, can you please write the words looks on it? Looks, L-O-O-K-S, looks. Find a place in your draft where you described what something looks like or where you could describe what something looks like, and put that sticky note by that spot. On another sticky note, will you write the word sounds? Find a place in your draft where you described what something sounds like or where you could describe what something sounds like, and put that sticky note by that spot in your draft. Take the last sticky note, and will you write the word likes on it? Like, or just like, yeah. Find a spot in your draft that you really like. And will you put that sticky note by that spot in your draft that you really like? So I'm going to model for you what it is I'm going to ask you to do during writing time today. So then I would explain to the kids, this is my piece. This is an example that will be provided for you in the text, but you can, of course, use any sample of your own. Like I use one about my nephew's riding a bike. And what's that electric scooter thing called? A razor with a rope tied in between them. Yeah. That's what I write about. And so I have it up here. And so as they were marking things, I'm marking things on my draft as well with sticky notes. And then afterwards, I would model for them one of the places where I didn't describe something. Like I don't really do a good job on describing the bike. And so I model for them just inserting the words that I want to add to that sentence above it. And then I usually do one with the sounds because Hunter screamed, and I know I could definitely add something there. I model that, and once again, making them see that I've left space in between my lines so I can add that there, and just add whatever it is that I want, take the sticky note away. And then I usually do, I think in the lesson you actually go through all the 5 senses. I only had you do a couple. A couple things about that. First of all, they've been taught ahead of time through the first 2 weeks that including those sensory details helps the reader better understand what happened. So they know that's an element, and it's a concept that they're familiar with as far as using that term sensory details. I usually do something like taste, and I just tell them, there's nowhere in my piece where that really fits. I'm not going to force something into it, so I'm going to just not worry about that sticky note, because I'm sure some of you may have had one of those that doesn't really fit in your piece, and we don't want them to force it into it. So I model that with my sample, and then their writing assignment for today would be to go back and add those sensory details on those places that they marked if it was a space where they didn't have sensory details, and then find some other places where they could add those sensory details in their writing. And then, of course, finish their writing if it's not finished. And then it would probably give them another option in case they happen to finish all that. So what you just did was, what was it? It was revision. And so the difference is, when I used to do revision, it was individual. and it covered 50 million things. And rarely was it directly related back to what I had just taught or specific to an element to that genre. So now it allows revision to happen, whole group, but it's specific to what you've been teaching in that genre, and it's specific to an element that we want included in their writing. When you look at research on conferring with kids and doing revision conferences, one of the first things they tell you is that you can only work with them on one or two things. You can work with them on 50, but what do they walk off with? Nothing. So one or two things, and I struggled with that so much because you look at the paper and there's like 50 million things wrong, but really, we're writing personal narratives. I need them to understand sensory details and be able to show those in their piece. I've done instruction on it, so it makes sense. That was revision, and nobody pulled their hair out, including me. To me, it was just brilliant. So when we talked about materials, another material that you will want is sticky notes. Like, we all should just invest in sticky notes because you'll use tons and tons of them. For this, for revision, the little ones work best. Those little cube ones, I think not the square, they're still rectangular, but the smaller ones, those work best. And I just had them either in a basket that everyone knew where they could get it or at their tables. And yes, they'll hoard them and they'll find them in their desk and everywhere. But if they're going to do revision, the thing is, they're doing revision and they know they're doing revision, but it doesn't feel like that revision task that they've done in the past where they fought you on it. I acknowledged it. If you had a sensory detail, great, mark it. And I love those kids that mark it, and then you read them like, okay, that's, but that's fine. But at least it kind of gives us a direction to go. So what questions do you have about revision? Make sense? Yeah.
A really basic question.
Mm-hmm.
All those writings from early on that they chose from,
Mm-hmm.
do you keep that all like just in one notebook and
Yep.
they save it and they just never turn it
Yep.
off?
That's right.
It all in?
Yep. They don't do any other writing in that note. All of their writing stays in the notebook until they write their final copy. They do all the work, and I struggled with that concept a lot in the beginning, and as I kind of let go of things year after year, finally I get it, and it works out just fine. Mm-hmm. One thing I would advocate on the notebooks, though, because I'll forget to tell you, so they don't tell you this in the manuals, I don't think, but one thing you might want to do is have them tab off a section when you start a unit, because I would have kids that would write their personal narrative ideas like they just opened the back of the book or the middle, and then you say, open up to the personal narrative section, but Miss Witt, it's all over my book, and it just drove, and it's a control thing too. But if I put a tab as we started a new unit, they knew they had to write behind that tab, and that just kind of helped to keep it organized so I didn't have that issue. So that helped a whole bunch. And I didn't even buy the tabs. I would just get those sticky notes and just give them a sticky note, and they would just, put it on the side and label it for that section. Okay, that's not the only revision lesson. Another element that they learn in personal narratives is that, the lesson would end by having them share, and probably even before they would go back to write, they would probably share one of the places they marked and what they're thinking about, maybe talk with their partners. And then the lesson would end by them sharing a sentence that they did go back and make a revision to. And your questions are around, how did that help you as the reader better picture that in your mind so that they really understand why that's important. Another revision lesson that is done is on opening sentences. So they have read several personal narratives. This is in their student writing handbook. So they would get this page. These are all opening sentences from 3 personal narratives that you've already read with them. So we're going to look at them a little bit closer today and with their partners to have them examine what is it that the author does in each of those to really hook you and grab your attention. Because they've learned that an element of a personal narrative is that it grabs your attention right away with that good, strong lead. I will tell you that some of them will read these, I think it's in the 5th grade one, and they'll say, well, Miss Witt, that second one really doesn't grab my attention. Okay, why doesn't it? What could they have done to grab your attention? And then they will go back for revision specifically looking at their lead and think about how they can revise it. They'll have opportunities to talk to their partner first, and then that becomes something that's on their peer conferring list as well when they go to confer, as far as talking to their partner about, did my lead grab you? Did it get you interested, and if so, how? Questions on that? So it's very specific, it's very focused, and it's directly related back to the elements of that genre and what you have already covered in your instruction. I'm going to give you a break, and then we're going to start to look at the bits and pieces of it, and I'll walk you through editing as well so you can see what that looks like. So it's 10:20. How about 10 minutes? Does that give you a good amount of time to... Okay, so we'll start back at 10:30.